Grüezi miteinander und alle zusammen. Hello and welcome to another tutorial. This time we are walking through the demo track that I've made for CYCLOPEDIA 2, the sample pack with over 7,000 samples, which is out now on soundsfed.com. My name is Christian Hirt, aka Passenger 10, and this is the track Falling, which I made only with samples from CYCLOPEDIA 2, the sample pack that is out now on soundsfed.com. I'm first going to play through the full track so you hear the idea and what we are going to talk about. And then we are going to take it from top to bottom and going through each and every sample, each and every track with more details and more information. So let's roll it out.
I've been crying out for help when you were fading in, lost beyond the truth. Life can never break me. I've been falling for you. Let me feel your soul. I've been falling for you.
That's it. That's the whole track. And as I said, and as you can see, this track was made only with samples from the CYCLOPEDIA 2 sample pack, including some beautiful vocals by one of the 4 singers that contributed vocal samples for this sample pack. Actually, I'm very very happy with these vocals. They all sound very beautiful, very usable. So it was a pure bliss to create some music with those vocals. In this case, I took the vocal hook 3 by the singer Alessa, but we are gonna get to that. We are starting here on the top, which is usually in my work process the drums, because they basically tell me where I'm gonna have breaks, where I'm gonna have certain drums. So it also helps me to know where in the arrangement I am. So I usually put the drums on top. I started with a kick drum from the signature folder of the one-shot kick drums. And this one is the kick number 8 in that folder. I pretty much liked how it has this nice bottom, and the click was not too much for what I wanted to represent in this track, and which also goes very well with the vocals that I choose. Basically, I started with the vocal and then tried to find samples that go very well with that vocal so I can build a song around these vocals. I think you understood this idea as well. Then, of course, I wanted to have certain drum and percussion elements. I worked with a construction kit from the Melodic House and Techno drum kits, which is the number 6 here. I imported the separate stems, which allowed me to have them a little bit more processed when it comes to volume shaping and stuff. But you see here you see on the left side, this is basically the track that I am right now showcasing. So you see this one here doesn't have any kind of editing or extra plugins. Here we just enhanced the volume slightly a little bit. And here this is also flat, nothing added on, the way this sample is in the package. Then here I imported a rolling hi-hat loop from the rolling hi-hat loop folder, which is also no editing, no extra plugins here, just the volume drastically taken down to -14 dB. Then again from that kit I took the groove snares, which are here some kind of a fill-in, and also here nothing added on. This is all the way down to 0. Offbeat hi-hats, here I took them slightly a little bit to the right side, so they are nicely spread out in my mix. And I put a little bit of room, just a real slight slapback room reverb on, so it's not that dry in the mix. And then I added another extra shaker loop, which makes the whole thing a little bit more dreamy, a little bit more rolling and more straightforward. Here this is the shaker loop number 5 from the shaker loop section. This is a tonal clap, which I added just here in the intro part, basically before it goes into the first drop. That's taken from the tonal clap enhancers. Those are also all nicely with the tonal information. If you are, if you want to try to find a tonal enhancer clap that goes well with your track, and you can find what key they are in and what goes well with yours. So here I picked this one. Then I have from the organic top loop section another kind of shaker loop that had some other percussion elements in the background, which pretty nicely worked here in this intro breakdown. And that's basically the drums. So it's not the moon. Pretty simple here. Then I have some clap fill-ins that I took from the fill-in folder with the clap fill-ins. There is a special folder just for clap fill-ins, which I edited a little bit on the EQ side. I took here the high frequencies a little bit off. I took here a little bit of rumbleness out so it does not interfere with my bass and kick drum. and I added a little bit of reverb. In this case, I worked with the EOS, with the EOS 1, which is still my favorite reverb when it comes to like these cases, fill-ins. I love to put this reverb on my vocals and even on some instruments because it's a really nice, rich, warm reverb sound. Then we're getting to the next section, which here we are having the bass lines. Yep, these are the bass lines. So I took two different bass samples into the project. One from the progressive main bass folder and one from the progressive rolling bass folder. They work pretty nicely together somehow. It was a kind of a happy mistake because I didn't want to add two bass lines. I basically imported two bass lines to see which one would perform better for what I actually need. And at some point I had them by mistake playing both together, and they just made a real nice combination, the two of them. So I basically let them both play, which I rarely do, but in this case it worked. I had to process them a little bit, as you can see. Now the first one here I determined to be the main bass. So you see I added here in the lows quite a little bit more extra low end. I put on a sidechain, which I just put on the band, which means the sidechain is only working from 735 Hertz and down. And I have here an extra equalizer that smooths out a little bit on the low end, which I did in the very, very end when I processed the second bass line here, where I put on also a kickstart sidechain here all the way to almost 1000 Hertz. And I even put on a little bit more lows here as well. And a little bit of mids here too. Yeah, well, somehow, as I said, it was a happy mistake. They somehow really blended nicely together. And when I try to avoid that, I have two bass lines going in the sub usually. Here somehow it made sense. And yeah, that's sometimes the exceptions from the rules that show that there are actually no rules in music. Whatever sounds good works, right? I can remember once, like 20 years ago, I made a trance track and I accidentally had also two bass lines, and there was even one bass line that was accidentally in a wrong key. It was kind of like a half note or two half notes higher or lower than the other bass line. But for some reason, this worked out so nice and it sounded amazing in the clubs. It was a big, big club track back then. But just consisting of two basses that should have never worked together, that ruled out every rule that there is in EDM music theory. And so somehow it happened here that I have two bass lines playing in the very low end, as well as in the mid-range, I have to say, because both bass lines are having a very strong mid-range information here too. Let me showcase real quick. The second one. It's maybe also the way they are played and performed. They are not really interfering too much with each other. It's two very different characters of bass lines. That's why they somehow really work nicely together. What I did is I had to program some kind of a chord progression because I wanted to still, after a while, have the straight going bass line to go into a chord progression to add even more depth and even more emotions to the vocals. So I created here, let me see. I went 3 semitones down, and here I went 5 semitones up, which created this very dead and kind of emotional part on the second half of the drop, basically from here all the way to the end of the drop. But this is very easy and very easy manipulation in every DAW in 2024. So feel free to manipulate these bass loops to your needs, make your chord progressions. I know in Cyclopedia 1 I even offered these different bass lines on different keys. I think 4 years later the technology is advanced enough that we do not have to offer this kind of things anymore, which are very easily handleable by all of the current and modern DAWs. All right, we're going in the next section, which are arpeggios. Yes, these are the arpeggios. So I have a few different arpeggios here that basically also build some kind of lead atmosphere, right? That also have the job to work very well with the vocals and sometimes even take over to basically have this question-answer thing. So the first arpeggio is playing here from basically it comes in, we go to the automation section. Yeah, I faded slowly in by volume shaping. And do I also have, yes, no, not here. No filtering here, just volume shaping. So it basically slowly comes in volume wise, while the vocals here have some kind of a peak. It's kind of going into a repetitive hook mode, and the arpeggio is slightly taking over and having another lead section apart from the repetitive hook section that kind of keeps going. So I can showcase this here one more time. Let's check it out.
falling for you. Let me feel your soul. I've been falling for you. Let me feel whole. Let me feel whole.
And then here in the drop, I didn't want to continue the arpeggio because I thought the story was told of this arpeggio. It did his job. It worked very well with the vocal, introduced the next part, which is the drop. But then into the drop, it gave me a better feeling when I basically here created a second track, which is only the delay information, which basically takes a certain delay into the drop and not the full arpeggio section. So on the arpeggio, as we saw, just volume shaping, no other editing. This is the wet arpeggio from that specific folder. And here I put my favorite delay on, which is the replica from Native Instruments, all the way to 100%. Cut off the lows a little bit, cut off the highs a little bit. Feedback on 94%, which is quite a lot. But as you see here, I also shaped volume to make sure that it's not overlapping with other parts and going too far into the drop. I have it dotted and 8 notes. Let's see what other automations we have here. No other automations, so this must be, yeah, this is inactive. And the channel EQ usually should do exactly this. I take out some high frequencies and I take out some low frequencies. So this really gives that specific delay atmosphere and not just sounding like the sound keeps going in a different pattern. I really want that this is sounding exactly like a delay that slowly fades out and loses his high end and loses his low end and basically plays just in the mid-range. Then we are having in my opinion, the lead. These are two channels that go together. It's the same sample, just one in the drop and one in the outro. This basically is introduced very late in the track, and I can imagine that when I will prepare the track for release under my alias Passenger 10, will most likely going to extend this part, or maybe already introduce it somewhere earlier in the arrangement. But for showcasing all the samples and showcasing this demo track, this made sense to have it just somewhere here. And it basically has the same job as the first arpeggio, but I didn't want to use the first arpeggio anymore because it was working very nicely here in the breakdown, in the intro breakdown. But in the outro or in the drop, I wanted to have something that is a little bit more leadish, a little bit more rhythmic as well, and a little bit more taking over the lead. So we're checking out this part one more time. So you get the idea. As I said, this one is in the outro, which basically the difference is, as you can see, there is a sidechain on the one that is placed in the drop, and there is an EQ here instead of the sidechain, where I take a little bit low end off, but add slightly little bit in the mids, and it's probably also, yeah, it's a little bit lower in volume because it doesn't need to be that much in the forefront on the outro part. But also here you see this is pretty raw. I did not edit much. I took the wet sample from the folder and it just clicked. Next arpeggio is, and these two are also the same, just one in the drop and one in the breakdown. Same here. I need the sidechain mainly for the drops, and here in the intro part I can let it run the way it is programmed in the sample folder. This one is just a rhythmic supporting arpeggio. I wanted to have something that is basically filling the gap between the bass line and the high-end elements, which in this case are the arpeggios, the vocals, all the sound design that we are going to get to later. And I picked this sample here. That's all that it does. It's very dreamy, very moving, but it does the job, and it adds a little bit of more tension and dreamy feeling to these parts. What I did here to loosen up a little bit that very fast pace of the performance of the notes, I added slight little bit of tremolo effect, so the sample goes slightly from the left to the right side and back and forth and back and forth. And it also helps me avoid to have too many instruments in the middle of my stereo image, so I can basically have it a little bit panned out. That's what this Logic internal stock plugin does very well. As I said here, that's basically the same with a kickstart sidechain. And let's see, here is, no, this also seems to be inactive, so it's pretty much just a sidechain that is added in this part, and towards the end of the drop I'm fading the volume out. Now we're getting on to the vocals, and as I said in the beginning of the video, I started with the vocals. I thought this is a pretty beautiful top line that initially when I heard it I immediately had some ideas what I could do with it. So I imported them and tried to find samples that go together with the vocal. Also here I did not edit much. I imported the dry file from the section because I wanted to add a reverb to the needs of what I am going to have in the very end of the production, so I can take off or add a little bit more reverb when needed. Here I put on a Valhalla Shimmer reverb, which sometimes I do with these dreamy vocals, so they get a little bit more flavor. It adds a little bit more harmonics, and yeah, that worked very well here, as well as here send effects go to my EOS reverb, which, as I already told earlier, is one of my favorite reverbs for vocals and certain kinds of instruments. This is the lead voice, goes all the way through. Just here, I had to cut out a small part and retune it. And the reason for that is this singer has a very beautiful performance, and she had a lot of slowly pitch shifts in her performance, which if I would have tuned the vocals all the way through, I would have ruined her performance. So I tuned her performance just by chromatic, which leaves a little bit more room for her pitch shifting and her slight sweeps, vocal sweeps. And I also tuned them very, very, very smoothly and did not crank it up all the way. But here there was a section where she would sound a tiny little bit pitchy, and I would search for the actual note that she would wanted to sing here, and I put on an extra auto tune, which would basically smooth out just that tiny part. So I had to basically also here, same for the doubles and same for the tracks here in the drops. That's just to smooth out that small little part where I thought her performance was slightly pitchy. And then here we are having, that's a delay and reverb effect track where I just wanted to create a certain answer to her performance here. Let me showcase this real quick.
And life can never break me.
Basically repeats this small part here, but in a very strong reverb cloud. A little bit of extra EQing also here. We don't need the highs, we don't need the low frequencies. It should really be some kind of muffled, sounding like it is coming from far away. Then this here is the same track as up here, just with, as you see, sidechain. In the drop, really, usually I have 95% of all of my instruments sidechained, at least, if not all the way through the full 30,000 hertz spectrum, then at least on the bottom end or in certain frequency ranges where I think they could basically make some room for the kick drums and the bass lines. Then here as well, there is another, it's basically a big reverb / delay cloud. Let me showcase this one more time.
Lost beyond the truth.
Because we have this gap here to fill, and as I did not want to work too much with sound design all the way through, I wanted to have the vocals be the sound design in certain parts and fill up the gaps just by these wonderful clouds coming in and out. Then here, this is the double. There are, for most of the vocals performed by these four singers, there are doubles that are also in the folder. So you just place them underneath your main lead vocals and you get a nice, big, a little fuller sound if you want then. I had to do the exact same thing as with the lead. I had to tune this little part here a little bit further than here. This is the double in the drop with sidechain. And then here we have these FX vocals that are also some kind of answer to the question phrase that is the hook line here. Let me showcase this as well.
I've been falling for you.
Same thing here. I wanted to create a cloud that takes this into sphere, which is also the feeling or the emotion that this track is supposed to carry. And so it was really very well going along with the sound design that I came up placing around these vocals to make the track sound whatever it sounds right now. Then I had to find a nice supporting chord system for the vocals, and this is the MIDI file of the piano loop that I chose to support these vocals. I chose to work with the MIDI file here instead of the actual loop, just because I also wanted to use these MIDI files to layer the piano and add certain pads that support the piano, as well as a extra Reese bassline here. So you see this is the full piano. Then here we have a pad, a second pad, and this is a Reese bassline towards the end of the breakdown, intro breakdown, that basically supports just the bass note. So I took out all the other notes, just left the bass note. Let me see how I automated this. I automated a lot of volume here. The pads are basically slowly coming in, and here in this section towards the drop, they are slowly going out and decreasing in volume again. Same with the re-space here. For the pads, for those who are wondering what I used as pads, I used from Arturia a Solina pad. I like this plugin pretty much for pads and hunting sound design elements. I'm a big fan of this. And the second pad is from the Roland Cloud Jupiter 8 synthesizer. And then we have a long re-space, which is from the Diva plugin. Then we are going further on in the track, where we are finally entering the sound design stage, which is one of my favorite stages. Here I can really go wild. Here I can try out things, and same here. And also our library offers a ton of sound design and atmosphere loops that are destined to do exactly that job, to smooth out and to make your track sound unique in a certain way, to add certain flavor, certain extra spice to your tracks, which in my opinion is pretty important if you want to make professional sounding tracks and you want to stand out and have more than just an average sounding track that goes all the way through with one idea and 2 or 3 lead ideas. You need to have these extra sound design elements that very much take a track from an average level to a professional level, in my opinion. So feel free to dive into the sound design section, check out these loops, mess around with them, and make your track sound bigger and better. So what I usually do is I like to set the tone of the sound design with a certain drone pad. for this purpose, we created the send drone folder where we're having different kinds of send drones on certain keys for certain applications, whatever you need send drone for. There are more richer ones that have also some bottom end information. There are some thinner ones. There are some more filtered ones, some more open ones. So feel free to check this folder out. Very useful for exactly this kind of purpose. And if we are jumping into the automation, we're seeing here that I worked a lot with the filtering as well as the volume shaping. So you see, I filtered this. If we're opening up here, I filtered this pad with a high cut, so a low pass filter that smoothly here takes it all the way up towards the end of the breakdown. And here, as same idea as for the previous elements that we showcased, the second track is basically for the drop part, which has an additional sidechain on. I also added a little bit of low cut here, and I enhanced the mid-range a little bit, just so this is not interfering with our bass line, which in this case I didn't want. So yeah, also here in the drop you see it slightly goes up, goes down, up and down. It adds some little bit of more live feeling, a little bit more of an organic feeling. I like to do this very often. And then here from the tonal bed folder, I found this very cool sample. I had to transpose it by -3 half tones, but that way it sat very nicely here in certain areas when I wanted to enhance this already nice sounding send drone. And then one of my favorite folders, a very simple idea again, but very useful. I created a folder with single note tensions, which basically are performance of live instruments or synthesizer runs. And then I heavily processed these one notes with reverbs, time stretching, pitch shifting, and so on, to become these long drawn clouds, mainly over 16 bars, sometimes even longer. So you can basically use them as harmonics in your tracks. And that's what I did here as well. I used this single note drone as a harmonic to my actual chord progression, and the only thing I did is I faded this in and faded this out. You see there is no processing, no editing, no plugin whatsoever. It's just the raw information that is from the sample itself. Here another single drone tension, which is a different note, but I transposed it a little bit to actually fit that harmonic vibe that I wanted for the certain part. We can showcase this real quick if you want.
I've been falling, let me fall into your arms. Never break me. I've been falling for you. Let me feel your soul. I've been falling for you. Let me feel.
So you see these two tracks are really here to create more tension. So I actually produced a bunch of these kind of single note tensions took me longer to produce them because they are all basically, first I had an initial sound, I processed this sound, I resampled the sound, and maybe resample it again, time stretched it over and over again to really get more than just a synthesizer or a live acoustic performance in these notes. I wanted to really come up with certain sounds that are not easily producible in a conventional ways, but went through a lot of stages of processing. So yeah, pretty happy with those, and I use them heavily already in my productions as well. Then here we are having a reverb vocal sound, which is basically just going from one, or basically introducing another part of the track. Let's showcase this real quick. Or in this case, actually, I just thought it was sounding nice here, and I did not want to have it all the way going to the end of the sample, so I slowly took the volume down here. By the way, we also have two different vocal atmospheres here, which are here on top, below the vocals. These are more, and that's why I did not showcase them earlier, because this, for me, even though it's vocals, which are performed by my wife, are actually more intended to be sound design elements instead of actual vocals. So my wife performed certain very long drawn performance of single ad-lib sounds, and I flipped them or processed them into this very rich reverbish vocal atmospheres. As you can hear, or maybe here in the end you hear it much better than here. Very beautifully, heavenly sounding vocal atmospheres that can be found in the, I think, atmosphere section. These vocals are not in the vocal section because, as I said, for me it's more like I need this kind of content when I am working on the sound design. There are tons of these very beautiful vocal atmospheres, still organic because they were performed by a real person, but then process them to exactly fit that purpose. There are no dry files for this because the idea here was really to create these vocal atmospheres. It did not make sense to include these files as dry files. And as you see also here, there's no processing on this whatsoever. I didn't edit them in any way. You see even here, they are not even here, slightly little bit decreased in volume, but that's how they are on the sample pack. Okay, then here we have another reverse vocal sample, which very well was sitting in my track as a standalone effect. Also, these reverb vocals are performed by my wife, so she basically just performed one-shot notes, and some one-shot notes I took from the performance from the vocal atmosphere, and then I processed these samples over and over again to become these very unique reverse vocal effects. There's a bunch of conventional reverse vocals in the folder as well, but there's also like these heavily processed reverse vocal effects where I manipulated them in all sorts of ways. A short pad swell here. Yes, so you can see here around this point, I wanted to create more tension, more emotions. So I worked with a lot of extra sound design elements from the sample pack. Here, this is the short pad swell that slowly transitions into this part, because there I introduced the full beat with all the percussions, snares, hi-hats, and so on. So I wanted to have this to be a very emotional, very huge part. So on one hand, this short pad, then we're having a short sweep from the effect section, and we're having a tonal riser that I was placing in an overlapping way. So it's basically fading out here instead of going all the way to the peak of the tonal riser. Just because I wanted to have this as some kind of an overlapping additional pad that would create a little bit more tension. So if you want, I can play all these parts. Very beautifully on their own, right? So yeah, that's that part. Then we're moving on to the short sweep we had. Then here we have a conventional noise sweep, basically, that I placed here when we are transitioning from the breakdown into the drop. Pretty standard noise sweep. I processed a little bit by adding an extra reverb and by taking off a little bit of the high frequencies, which I thought would be too much for the environment that I set in this track. Then this one we also talked about. Next one is, and that's also a very cool folder, which I used to take from a trailer sample pack that I once came across and bought. They had a folder with all sorts of screams and signals inside, and I figured out they work very well in my tracks when I place them around drops or just certain parts where I want to have extra tension, right? So I tried to create a folder myself. I had my wife and me screaming and yelling all sorts of sounds into the microphone, and then I heavily processed them by adding overdrive, adding some distortion, adding EQ, reverb, and so on, to basically get this very signature sounding screams and signals. And for the signal sounds, I found and recorded a lot of horns, a lot of sounds that would very well make this distinctive signal sounds that can be used for this purpose as well. Let me showcase this standalone so you get an idea of what is expecting you in that folder. Yeah, that sounds like me yelling and then processing that sample. And here I placed it as an additional harmonic element here. It adds just a little bit more emotions in that transitioning part when you hear this yelling loop in the background. Obviously, this doesn't need to be loud in the mix or anything. It just needs to add a little bit of more harmonics, right? This can also be added in the first drop with, for example, together with a white noise downlifter or something. I use this, as I said, very often. So I took off the low frequencies as well as rolling and scooping out a little bit of the high end just to make it fit into this part of the track. Here we have -9 in the volume, so it's just sitting underneath the mix and not taking too much away of the actual idea and emotion of the track. Then there is a designed crash here as well. And then here, let me go. That's some random effect that I wanted to add to create a little bit more tension in the very beginning of the drop. This is an atonal modular FX. Also here we recorded a bunch of half modular synthesizer sounds and phrases, and then heavily processed them, resampled them until they would become this really nice and useful atonal modular or even atonal non-modular FX. Everything can be found in the FX section of the sample pack. Then in the intro part of the track, I added some extra tonal samples, like this tonal FX from the tonal FX folder, another one, which let me see, yes, I had to some of them I slightly transposed, right? This one as well here, I slightly transposed it, -1. Here as well, -1, and here -3. Just sometimes if it's just a one single note information, I can sometimes even look for harmonics, the third, the fifth, or the seventh, or if it's a major scale, the fourth, just to basically fit the harmonic needs that I want to create more emotions in the track. And then here is an extra tonal bed FX that is from the tonal bed section that made the whole section here a little bit more organic. Let me showcase this, or actually let's first see this one here is from the environmental texture section. So a lot of field recordings can be found there. And I found this very beautiful rain at noon with bird songs and children sounds in the background. Very inspiring for this part of the track, so I added this here as well. So let me just show you also this tonal FX one more time so you understand what they actually do here.
Crying out for help when you were fading in, lost beyond the truth. I've been falling, let me fall in.
So you see, I just tried to add a little bit more excitement when the vocal is basically ringing out. I'm not sure if you want to call it an answer to the question of the vocal, but in some ways it's an enhancement after the vocal rings out that just adds a little bit more organic feel in some way. And that's basically all that it does. I mean, as you can see here, we are working with 58 tracks if you are counting the mastering stem as well and the sidechain. So it's probably 55 tracks we are having here, and that's the full track, right? And as you could see, most of these samples are really just placed the way they are in the sample pack. And it took me about 2 hours to create this track. It's very easy, drag and drop. You just take the samples from the folders here from these 13 different sections, drag and drop them into your project and start messing around with them and start trying out, creating new tracks. So yeah, I mean, we have 7,100 and something, and I'm pretty sure in the next few days after I record this video, I will add a bunch more samples. So 23 gigabytes of content here. You should never run out of samples. If you ask me, definitely for me, this will be my go-to sample pack now for the coming years, when I need all sorts of one-shots, effects, atmosphere, melodies, and vocals. So I hope you guys are creating some great and awesome tracks with this sample pack. If you want some more detailed information about the sample pack, where I run through the folder system, feel free to check out our second video on YouTube to get more detailed information of how we sorted and filed the samples. So have fun, take care, grab your copy on soundsfed.com and make some hits. Stay safe. Bye guys. Thank you.